I'm currently sitting here at nearly midnight, scripting another sleep story for you, while most of the world sleeps. And as I was researching tonight's topic, I couldn't help but think about something we all experience. That restless feeling when there's nothing to do. You know that sensation, don't you? When you've scrolled through your phone for the 100th time today. When Netflix feels stale. When you're just bored. But here's the thing. We think boredom is a modern problem. We imagine people in the past were always busy, always working, always focused on survival. That couldn't be further from the truth. Tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey back to medieval times, roughly 500 to 1500 CE, where you'll discover that people dealt with boredom in ways that would shock you, delight you, and sometimes horrify you. We're going to follow different people from different walks of life, a peasant farmer, a wealthy merchant, a noble lady, and others, as they navigate their daily routines and find increasingly strange ways to cure their restlessness. We'll start with activities that might seem familiar, things you'd recognize today. But as our night unfolds, you'll witness pastimes so bizarre, so dangerous, and so utterly alien to our modern sensibilities, that you'll question whether these people were even the same species as us. So close your eyes, get comfortable, and let me transport you to a world where being bored didn't mean reaching for your phone. It meant something far more interesting. Picture yourself waking up in the year 1348 in a small village in England. The sun hasn't risen yet, but you can hear the church bell tolling for lauds, the early morning prayer. You're not a peasant, not quite nobility, but somewhere in between, perhaps a successful merchant or a skilled craftsman. Your life has rhythms completely foreign to the modern world. You see, medieval people didn't work the crushing 40-hour weeks we think of today. Instead, the liturgical calendar carved up the year with dozens of Sundays and holy days. People often paused work for worship and festivity, though what no work meant varied by place, job, and season. Harvest time meant brutal 16-hour days, but then came weeks of leisure when the crops were in and winter settled over the land. It's during these quiet periods, the long winter nights, the lazy summer afternoons between planting seasons, the rest days mandated by the church, that boredom crept in. And medieval people, just like you, had to find ways to fill those empty hours. Let me introduce you to some of the people you'll meet tonight. You are Thomas, a miller in the village of Little Wickham. It's a cold February evening in 1389, and the mill hasn't turned for 3 days. The stream partially frozen, and no grain to grind anyway. Your wife, Margaret, sits by the fire, mending. Your 2 children sleep in the loft above, and you are restless. In your calloused hands, you hold a set of dice made from sheep knucklebones. The ivory gleams in the firelight as you roll them again and again. Not for money, you have little of that, but for the simple pleasure of watching chance play out. Medieval people were obsessed with dice. They carved them from bone, wood, ivory. They carried them everywhere, pulled them out at taverns, at fairs, during breaks from work. But tonight, even the dice feel dull. You've rolled them 100 times, and Margaret has given you that look, the one that says you're being restless again, that you need to find something else to occupy your mind. So you walk to the corner where you keep your prized possession, a wooden board with holes carved into it. 9 men's Morris, They call this game. You and Margaret sit across from each other, placing your small wooden pieces, trying to get 3 in a row, while blocking each other's moves. The strategic, engaging, and completely free. Just carved wood and thought. This was medieval entertainment at its most basic level. Games that cost nothing but time. Games that could be played by firelight, that required no special equipment, beyond what you could carve yourself. Modern people have video games, with millions of dollars in development behind them, but you're finding genuine engagement in a game that's essentially tic-tac-toe with complications. As you play, you find your mind wandering to tomorrow night's plans. There's to be storytelling at the tavern. Old William has promised to tell the tale of Sir Gawain again, with all the voices and gestures. Medieval people craved narrative, the way we crave Netflix series. They would gather for hours to hear the same stories told again and again, each teller adding their own flourishes, their own interpretations. But even as you anticipate tomorrow's entertainment, you feel that familiar itch. These quiet pleasures, these simple games and stories, they're not quite enough anymore. You've heard rumors of stranger diversions in the larger towns, things that would make Margaret blush and the priest frown. Your mind begins to wander to possibilities beyond your small village. Now you are Agnes, wife to Geoffrey the baker, and it's a warm May morning in 1402. The sun is shining. The smell of fresh bread fills your kitchen, and you can hear laughter from the village green. Today is May Day, one of those feast days when no work is allowed, when the entire community gathers for celebration. You wipe the flour from your hands and step outside to see the young people of the village setting up for the morning's festivities. There's Thomas, the shepherd's son, weaving ribbons around a tall pole. There's Mary, the carpenter's daughter, her cheeks flushed with excitement. They're preparing for the May dancing, that ancient tradition where couples weave in and out around the maypole, ribbons streaming, feet moving to the rhythm of pipe and tabor. This is how medieval people dealt with boredom, not individually, scrolling through personal devices, but communally. The entire village became the entertainment system. When restlessness struck, it struck everyone at once, and the cure was collective. You join the circle of women, preparing food for the day's feast. As you knead dough for special May Day bread, the conversation flows around you. Gossip about who's been seen walking with whom. Speculation about whether young Peter will finally work up the courage to ask for Emma's hand. Stories about the strange lights seen in the woods last week. But then someone, you think it might be Joan the Weaver, leans in with a wicked smile. Did you hear what they're planning for next week's fair? She whispers. The other women gather closer. They say there's to be stool ball, the kind where boys and girls swap. Sly looks over the wicket, and maybe even a purse prize for the fastest runner. Your pulse quickens. Stool ball matches, with their courtship overtones, were exciting enough. But foot races with prize money, that was scandalous and thrilling. The idea of women competing publicly for actual coin was both shocking and enticing. As the May dancing begins, you watch the young couples weave their patterns, but your mind is elsewhere. The simple pleasures of community dancing and storytelling suddenly seem tame. You find yourself craving something more intense, more visceral. The competitive games represent a step up in medieval entertainment. Still legal, still sanctioned, but definitely more exciting than these traditional celebrations. You realize that even in medieval times, people experienced what we might recognize as entertainment fatigue. The same songs, the same dances, the same stories. Eventually, they needed more stimulation, and medieval society was ready to provide it if you were brave enough to seek it out. The afternoon stretches ahead, filled with traditional pleasures, but your mind is already planning for next week's fair, where you might witness something far more thrilling. You are now William de Ashby, a successful wool merchant, and it's a crisp October evening in 1445. Your business is thriving. The wool trade between England and Flanders has been good to you. You have money in your purse, a comfortable house in the prosperous town of Stamford, and most importantly, you have access to entertainments that common folk can only dream of. Tonight, you're walking through the narrow streets toward the market square, where you've heard there's to be a special entertainment. Not just the usual storytelling or simple music, but something more sophisticated. A guild's pageant wagon has arrived in town, and they're promising a performance of a mystery play, one of those elaborate religious dramas that the prosperous craft guilds sponsor. As you reach the market square, the crowd is already gathering around the beautifully painted wagon. The warmth and excitement are palpable. The air fills with anticipation as families jostle for the best viewing positions. Your merchant's coin has bought you a spot near the front, where you can see clearly. The stage is the wagon itself, a marvel of medieval engineering that unfolds to reveal painted backdrops and hidden compartments. When the guild players begin their performance of Noah's flood, you're transported. A guild's pageant wagon rattles into the square. Today's play is Noah's flood, painted heavens, a pop-up ark, and Noah's wife heckling him to the crowd's delight. This is entertainment technology at its medieval best. No special effects beyond painted cloth and clever carpentry. No recorded music beyond a single lute player. But the emotional impact is genuine. You find yourself caught up in the drama, laughing at Noah's wife's refusal to enter the ark, gasping when the flood waters, blue cloth manipulated by hidden hands, seem to rise around the stage. But as the performance winds down and you walk home through the dark streets, you realize that even this sophisticated entertainment hasn't fully satisfied your restless spirit. You've heard rumors of other diversions available to men of means. In London, they say, there are bathhouses where the entertainment extends far beyond mere cleanliness. In Paris, wealthy merchants can buy entrance to exclusive gaming houses where the stakes are higher than a few pence, where fortunes change hands over the roll of ivory dice. And then there are the tournaments. You've never attended one. They're expensive, and frankly, you're not sure your merchant's heart could handle the violence. But the stories you've heard, knights charging at each other with real weapons, horses colliding at full speed, the very real possibility of serious injury in the name of entertainment. Your merchant's mind does quick calculations. You could afford to attend a tournament. You could afford to visit one of those exclusive bathhouses. You have the means to step up from community entertainment to more dangerous, more exclusive pleasures. The question is, do you have the courage? You are now Lady Margaret de Clare, and it's a bright June morning in 1423. You wake in your solar, the private chamber atop your husband's castle, to the sound of horns echoing across the valley. Today is the first day of a 3-day tournament, and knights from across England have gathered to compete for prizes, glory, and your favor. As a noblewoman, your relationship with entertainment is completely different from that of common folk. You don't gather with the community for simple pleasures. You create the entertainment, sponsor it, control it. Boredom, for you, is not about having nothing to do, but about having seen everything, experienced everything that your elevated position allows. From your window, you can see the lists being prepared, long wooden barriers that will separate the charging knights, painted pavilions where competitors will rest between bouts, wooden stands where you and other nobles will sit to watch men try to seriously injure each other for sport. This is what medieval aristocrats did. When they were bored, they created elaborate spectacles of violence. Not the controlled, safety-regulated sports we know today, but genuine combat with real weapons and very real consequences. You've seen knights carried from the field with crushed skulls, with splintered lances through their chests, with arms twisted at impossible angles. Your maid, Alice, helps you dress in your finest gown, silk from the east, dyed with expensive purple, trimmed with ermine. Your clothing alone costs more than most peasants see in a lifetime. But it's not just vanity. As a sponsor of today's events, you must look the part. Your appearance is part of the entertainment. But as you prepare for the day's spectacle, your mind wanders to other diversions available to someone of your station. Last month, you participated in a hunt that lasted 3 days, not for food, but for the thrill of the chase. 50 servants, 24 hounds, hawks for falconry, and a single stag that led you through forest and field before finally being brought down. The kill itself was almost anticlimactic after the extended pursuit, but the ceremony surrounding it, the formal presentation of the stag's parts to different members of the hunting party, the elaborate feast afterward, the songs composed to commemorate the hunt, that was the real entertainment. And yet, even these elevated pleasures sometimes feel insufficient. You've heard whispers of stranger diversions in the French court, masks where participants wear grotesque masks and act out forbidden desires, private theatrical performances that would scandalize the church, games of chance where entire estates change hands in a single evening. As you walk down the stone stairs toward the great hall, where you'll break your fast before the tournament begins, you feel that familiar restlessness. Even unlimited wealth and social position can't entirely cure boredom. If anything, having access to every conventional entertainment makes you crave something unconventional, something dangerous, something that pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable. The tournament will provide some of that thrill, real violence, real danger, real consequences. But you find yourself wondering what other boundaries might be pushed, what other taboos might be broken in the name of entertainment. You are now Brother Augustine, a Benedictine monk at the Abbey of St. Albans, and it's the eve of the boy bishop festivities in December 1456. Tomorrow, everything you've dedicated your life to, order, hierarchy, reverence, solemnity, will be turned temporarily upside down. And despite yourself, Despite your vows, despite years of theological training, you're excited about it. The boy bishop tradition was medieval Christianity's strangest custom. A day when the youngest choir boys took charge of certain church services, when sacred rituals became playful performances, when the normal order became deliberately inverted. It was the church's own antidote to boredom, its recognition that even religious life needed moments of sanctioned mischief and laughter. You're in the scriptorium, supposedly copying manuscripts, but your attention keeps drifting to the sounds coming from the chapel. The choir boys are rehearsing for tomorrow's special services. You can hear them practicing their mock solemn responses and giggling as they try on the ceremonial vestments that will transform the youngest among them into temporary bishops. This is entertainment that would still seem unusual today. Imagine a modern church service where children temporarily take on adult ceremonial roles, where the youngest choir member gets to wear bishop's robes and lead certain prayers. Yet for medieval Christians, this annual celebration of role reversal was not just tolerated, but encouraged as a necessary recognition of innocence and wonder. Your own role in tomorrow's festivities weighs on your mind. As one of the more scholarly brothers, you've been asked to help the boy bishop prepare his special sermon, a real theological address delivered by a child in elaborate vestments to a congregation that includes actual bishops and abbots. Part of you, the part trained in decades of monastic discipline, finds this departure from normal order slightly uncomfortable. But another part, the part that sometimes finds the endless routine of prayers and copying manuscripts numbingly repetitive, is charmed by the approaching celebration. As you try to focus on the gospel text you're copying, your mind wanders to stories you've heard from other religious houses. At Salisbury Cathedral, they say, the boy bishop tradition includes a full procession through the town. At St. Paul's in London, the boy bishop allegedly delivers sermons so thoughtful that grown men weep. These stories both inspire and intrigue you. Even within the church, that institution dedicated to order, hierarchy, and the sacred, people found ways to celebrate innocence, to create gentle entertainment that honored both tradition and the need for occasional joy. The irony isn't lost on you. Tomorrow, in the name of religious celebration, you'll witness a child wearing vestments worth more than most people earn in a year, delivering theological insights that might shame grown theologians. You'll participate in ceremonies that turn normal hierarchy on its head, while somehow reinforcing the deeper spiritual truths that hierarchy is meant to serve. And when it's over, when the boy bishop festivities end and normal religious life resumes, you'll return to your copying and praying and ordered existence. But you'll carry with you the memory of that brief, sanctioned celebration, and the knowledge that even the holiest life sometimes needs a touch of innocent wonder to remain truly alive. You are Emma, 16 years old, daughter of Geoffrey the baker. We met earlier. It's a warm August evening in 1467, and you're walking through the crowded streets of York toward the shambles, where tonight's entertainment promises to be unlike anything you've experienced before. Your father thinks you're at evening prayers. Your mother believes you're visiting your aunt, but you're actually heading toward something that would horrify them both. Your first experience of what the adults whisper about but rarely discuss openly. The crowd grows thicker as you approach the market square. Merchants have closed their stalls, but the area buzzes with an energy you've never felt before. Torches have been lit, despite the remaining daylight, creating dancing shadows on the half-timbered buildings. The air smells of sweat, ale, and something else, something metallic that makes your stomach flutter with nervousness. Tonight, the town stages a community shaming procession, rough music, and a backward-riding culprit, a way of punishing those who break social norms that spread from French towns into English custom. Someone in the community has violated the unspoken rules that hold society together, and the people have gathered to deliver their judgment, not through courts or formal justice, but through collective humiliation, noise, and spectacle. You push through the crowd until you can see what everyone has gathered to watch. In the center of the square, a man sits backward on a donkey, holding the animal's tail instead of its reins. His face is painted white, with red circles on his cheeks, like a grotesque mask. Around his neck hangs a sign that you can't read. You don't have letters, but someone nearby helpfully explains, "Wife beater." The crowd begins to make noise, not cheering or applause, but a deliberately ugly cacophony. Pots and pans clanging together, sticks rattling against wooden buckets, voices raised in mocking songs. This is the rough music that gives the ceremony its name. Sound designed not to please, but to punish, to drive shame deep into the target's bones. But this is just the beginning. As you watch, fascinated and horrified, other members of the community join the procession. They've brought an effigy, a straw figure dressed to represent the man's wife. As the donkey parade moves through the streets, people take turns hitting the effigy with sticks, tearing at its clothing, eventually pulling it apart entirely. This is entertainment that's completely alien to modern sensibilities. Imagine if your neighbors decided someone had behaved badly, and instead of calling the police or filing a complaint, they organized a public humiliation parade. Imagine if social media shaming became physical, visceral, inescapable. Yet for medieval people, this community procession served multiple entertainment functions simultaneously. It was community theater. Everyone had a role to play. It was moral instruction, a vivid lesson about social consequences. It was licensed aggression, a chance to express violence and cruelty in a socially acceptable context. As the procession moves past you, the man on the donkey makes eye contact. His expression is blank, almost resigned. This isn't his first community shaming. Wife beaters were frequent targets, and he knows the ritual must play out completely before he can return to normal life. But you notice something else in his eyes. Despite the humiliation, despite the noise and mockery, there's a strange sort of engagement there. Even the victim of this bizarre entertainment seems oddly energized by it. The community procession isn't just punishment. It's drama, spectacle, a break from the ordinary routine that everyone, including its target, finds somehow compelling. As the crowd moves on, following the donkey and its burden, you realize you have a choice. You can return home, tell your parents you attended prayers, and pretend this strange spectacle never happened. or you can follow the procession. See how far this medieval entertainment will go. Witness what happens when boredom drives people to create increasingly elaborate spectacles of controlled cruelty. Your feet begin to move, following the torches and the rough music. Deeper into the night, you are Peter the blacksmith, and it's a sweltering July afternoon in the late 15th century. Your forge has been cold for 2 days, not because you lack work, but because the entire town has shut down for the summer fair. And today's main attraction is something that makes your hands shake with anticipation and horror. They've built a ring in the market square, not for wrestling or dancing, but for something far more primal. You can smell it before you see it. The musky, wild scent of the bear that's been brought from London for today's entertainment. Bear baiting, one of medieval England's most popular and brutal spectacles. You push through the crowd, using your blacksmith's bulk to secure a spot near the wooden barriers that surround the ring. The bear is magnificent and terrifying, a massive brown creature chained to a post in the center of the ring, the small eyes scanning the crowd with what looks like intelligence and rage. This is entertainment that would be illegal today, that modern people would find abhorrent. But for medieval audiences, it represented the perfect combination of spectacle, gambling, and controlled danger. You've brought a week's wages to bet on how many dogs the bear will kill before it's brought down. The first dog is released, a mastiff bred specifically for this purpose, trained from birth to attack without hesitation. The crowd's roar as dog and bear collide is deafening. The violence is immediate and devastating. Within seconds, the dog is lifted off its feet by a massive paw, thrown against the barriers with a wet thudding sound. But the crowd wants more. A second dog, then a third. The bear, despite its chains limiting movement, proves why it's the king of medieval animal entertainment. Claws and teeth work with terrifying efficiency. Blood pools in the dirt of the ring. You find yourself caught up in the collective excitement, despite your better nature. The crowd around you is betting frantically, not just on the outcome, but on specific details. How many dogs will die? Will the bear lose an eye? How long until it collapses from exhaustion and blood loss? This betting culture was an integral part of medieval entertainment. Almost every spectacle, from bear baiting to public executions, became an opportunity for gambling. People would wager on anything. Which criminal would confess first? How many dogs would be needed to bring down a bull? Whether a particular knight would survive a tournament. As the afternoon progresses and more dogs are brought into the ring, you notice something disturbing about your own reactions. The initial shock has worn off. You're no longer wincing at the violence. Instead, you're analyzing it, calculating odds, cheering for particularly impressive displays of animal ferocity. This desensitization was a common feature of medieval entertainment culture. People regularly exposed to extreme violence as spectacle developed not just tolerance, but genuine appreciation for increasingly intense displays. What started as shocking became routine, which created demand for ever more extreme entertainments. The bear, bleeding from dozens of wounds, finally begins to weaken. The crowd senses the approaching climax. Bets are settled, new wagers made. Someone near you predicts that the final dog, a particularly vicious-looking specimen, will finish the job within minutes. But as you watch the final brutal confrontation between exhausted bear and fresh dog, a part of your mind wanders to stories you've heard of even more extreme entertainments. In London, they say, there are exclusive gaming houses where the stakes are higher than anything you've ever imagined. In Paris, public executions have become elaborate theatrical productions with carefully choreographed ceremonies. The bear finally falls, and the crowd erupts in a mixture of cheers and groans as bets are won and lost. But as you collect your winnings, you correctly predicted the bear would kill 7 dogs before dying. You realize that even this savage spectacle hasn't entirely satisfied your appetite for excitement. Medieval people, you're beginning to understand, developed increasingly extreme tastes in entertainment. Each shocking spectacle became routine, creating demand for something even more intense, more dangerous, more transgressive. And tomorrow, you've heard, there's to be a public execution in the market square. A horse thief sentenced to hang. But executions in medieval times were never simple hangings. They were elaborate productions designed to entertain as much as to punish. Your mind is already planning your attendance. You are Alice Brewster, keeper of the Crown Inn, and it's dawn on a crisp October morning in 1501. Today, the town square will host its first public execution in nearly 3 years, and you've been preparing all week, not just emotionally, though watching a man die is never easy, but commercially, executions are among the most profitable days in the tavern business. Your taproom is already filling with travelers who've journeyed from neighboring villages specifically for today's entertainment. They've paid for rooms, meals, and will drink heavily before and after the main event. Public executions were medieval tourism. People planned trips around them, brought their families, made entire holidays out of watching someone die. Through your windows, you can see the scaffold being completed in the market square. It's not the simple gallows of popular imagination, but an elaborate wooden stage with painted decorations. The town has invested considerable resources in making today's execution visually impressive. This is theater, and the set design matters. The condemned man, Robert Ashford, convicted of stealing horses, has spent the night in the parish church, making his final confession and receiving last rites. This spiritual preparation is as much about the audience as the criminal. Medieval executions were religious spectacles designed to demonstrate God's justice and provide moral instruction to the community. But as you serve breakfast to your excited customers, you're struck by the carnival atmosphere. These people aren't here out of grim duty or religious obligation. They're here because public executions provided entertainment that no other spectacle could match. The ultimate stakes, the final drama, the irreversible conclusion. Your own feelings about today's events are complicated. You've known Robert Ashford since childhood. He's been a customer, always paid his debts, never caused trouble in your tavern. Yet horse theft is a capital crime, and the law must be satisfied. More practically, His death will provide you with your best business day of the month. As the morning progresses, the crowd in the square grows larger and more boisterous. Street vendors appear, selling meat pies, ale, and small trinkets. Children run between the adults, playing games of hangman with miniature nooses. The entire community has transformed the occasion of Robert's death into a festival. This commercialization of death was a standard feature of medieval executions. Towns competed to make their executions more spectacular, more memorable, more likely to attract visitors and their money. Executioners became local celebrities, known for their showmanship as much as their efficiency. People sometimes wagered around such spectacles, though the focus remained on the moral drama being enacted. Around noon, the procession begins. Robert is brought from the church on a cart, accompanied by a priest and the sheriff. He's been given ale to steady his nerves, and his face shows a mixture of resignation and strange excitement. Even the condemned man seems caught up in the drama of his own death. The crowd follows the cart to the scaffold, and you lock up your tavern to join them. This is community entertainment. Everyone participates. Everyone has a role to play. You're not just a spectator, but part of a collective experience that bonds the community through shared witness of ultimate drama. On the scaffold, Robert is given a chance to make his final speech. This was considered one of the highlights of any execution. The condemned man's last words, his final confession, his plea for forgiveness or defiant rejection of his fate. The crowd listens in complete silence, hanging on every word. Robert's speech is surprisingly eloquent. He confesses his crime, asks forgiveness from those he's wronged, warns the young men in the crowd to avoid his path. But he also displays a kind of gallows humor, making jokes that get surprised laughter from the audience. Even facing death, he understands that this is performance, and he plays his part skillfully. As the noose is placed around his neck, you find yourself oddly moved, not just by pity for Robert's fate, but by the raw human drama of the moment. This is entertainment stripped to its most basic elements: life, death, moral consequence, community witness. The execution itself is almost anticlimactic after the elaborate buildup. Robert drops, the crowd gasps, and within minutes, it's over. But the afternoon is just beginning. The body will hang for hours as a warning, and the crowd will remain, drinking, talking, processing what they've witnessed. As you walk back toward your tavern, already calculating how much ale you'll sell during the afternoon's post-execution revelry, you realize that you've just participated in entertainment that reveals something fundamental about medieval people. They didn't just tolerate extreme spectacles. They craved them, organized them, turned them into community celebrations. And yet, even as you unlock your tavern and prepare for the afternoon's business, you hear whispers in the crowd about even stranger entertainments. Stories from London about dancing manias that last for days. Tales from the continent about religious processions where participants whip themselves bloody. Rumors of judicial combats where disputes are settled by single combat to serious injury. The execution, shocking as it was, now seems almost tame Compared to these whispered possibilities, you are Brother Francis, a Franciscan friar, and it's a humid summer day in 1374. You've just arrived in the German town of Aachen, drawn by reports of something that both horrifies and fascinates you, a dancing mania that has gripped the population for nearly a month. The reports seemed impossible when you first heard them in your monastery near Cologne. Entire communities seized by an irresistible compulsion to dance, continuing for days without rest, dancing until they collapsed from exhaustion, some dancing until they died. But as you enter Aachen's market square, you see that the reports were not exaggerated. If anything, they understated the bizarre reality. Hundreds of people fill the square, their bodies moving in rhythms that seem both frenzied and synchronized. These aren't the organized dances of village festivals or court celebrations. This is something else entirely, a collective madness that has transformed ordinary citizens into wild, ecstatic performers in a drama no one scripted. The dancers range in age from children to elderly adults, from well-dressed merchants to ragged beggars. Social distinctions have disappeared in the face of whatever force has seized them. They dance together, separately, in small groups, in long chains that snake through the narrow streets. Their clothing is torn and filthy from days of continuous movement. What strikes you most is their faces. These aren't expressions of joy or celebration, but something far more complex. Pain mixed with ecstasy, exhaustion combined with manic energy, terror alongside what looks like religious rapture. Many of the dancers are weeping as they move, their tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on their cheeks. This is entertainment, if it can be called that, at its most extreme. The dancing mania represents a complete breakdown of normal social order, a collective abandonment of reason and restraint. Yet crowds of spectators have gathered from across the region to witness it, to participate vicariously in this explosion of uncontrolled human behavior. As a religious man, you try to understand this phenomenon in theological terms. Is this divine ecstasy like that experienced by mystics and saints? Or is it demonic possession, a mass hysteria sent by Satan to corrupt Christian souls? The local priests seem as confused as you are, alternately blessing the dancers and attempting to exorcise them. But as you watch more closely, you begin to notice patterns that suggest something more complex than simple madness or divine intervention. The dancing intensifies when crowds gather to watch. Individual dancers seem to feed off the attention of spectators, their movements becoming more dramatic, more theatrical when they have an audience. This performative aspect of the dancing mania reveals something disturbing about medieval entertainment culture. The line between genuine religious experience and theatrical performance had become so blurred that perhaps the dancers themselves couldn't distinguish between authentic spiritual ecstasy and elaborate public display. You decide to move closer, to try to speak with one of the dancers. A young woman, perhaps 20 years old, spins past you with her arms raised toward heaven. Her eyes are rolled back, showing only whites. But when you call out to her, she responds, "Can you hear me, sister?" you ask, in Latin, then German. Her response is fragmentary, gasping words between labored breaths. Can't stop. God commands, must dance until judgment. But even as she speaks of divine compulsion, you notice that she's aware of the crowd around her, that her movements become more dramatic when spectators lean in closer. This isn't simple possession or madness. It's something more complex, a form of extreme performance art that blends genuine altered consciousness with theatrical display. As afternoon turns to evening, you witness the darker side of this entertainment. Several dancers collapse completely, their bodies unable to sustain the prolonged exertion. Some are carried away by family members, but others are simply left where they fall, their collapse becoming part of the spectacle. For those still dancing, one man, an older merchant, judging by his torn but once fine clothing, begins showing signs of severe distress. His face has turned blue. His movements become spastic rather than rhythmic. Yet the crowd of spectators doesn't call for help. They watch his deterioration with the same fascination they've shown for the more dramatic dancers. This represents entertainment pushed beyond any reasonable boundary. The dancers have become gladiators in an arena where the combat is against their own bodies, their own sanity. The spectators have become complicit in a form of mass suicide disguised as religious experience. As darkness falls and torches are lit around the square, the dancing continues. If anything, the combination of firelight and exhaustion makes the scene more theatrical, more otherworldly. Shadows dance on medieval walls, creating the impression of an even larger crowd of frenzied performers. You realize that you've witnessed something that reveals the darkest potential of medieval entertainment culture. When communities become bored with conventional diversions, when they crave ever more extreme spectacles, the result can be collective madness, disguised as religious ecstasy. Yet even as you prepare to leave Aachen, to return to your monastery, and try to make sense of what you've witnessed, you hear rumors of even stranger phenomena. Reports from Italian cities of flagellant processions, where participants whip themselves to death in public squares. Stories from French towns of mass hysteria, disguised as demonic possession, where entire convents become theaters of religious mania. The dancing continues behind you as you walk toward the town gates, and you wonder if medieval people have pushed the boundaries of entertainment so far that they've lost the ability to distinguish between spectacle and genuine spiritual experience, between performance and madness. You are Sir Geoffrey de Montfort, and it's dawn on what might be the most profitable or ruinous day of your career. The year is 1356, and you're preparing for a tournament that has attracted knights from across Europe, not for the pageantry and controlled combat of later, safer tournaments, but for something far more dangerous and potentially lucrative. MA with tilde LA with tilde copyright E in the old style, where the line between sport and warfare has been deliberately blurred. Your squire, young Edmund, helps you into your armor with hands that shake slightly. This isn't his first tournament, but it may be the first, where he watches his master either gain a fortune in ransoms or lose everything he owns. The armor itself tells the story, not the ceremonial plate of later tournaments, but battle-tested mail and steel, scarred from previous combats, designed for survival and the serious business of capturing opponents. Through the narrow window of your tent, you can see the field where today's entertainment will unfold. It's enormous, nearly a mile square of open ground, with few barriers, minimal safety measures, but clear rules about surrender and capture. This is a Emma with tilde L with tilde copyright E. In the truest sense, organized chaos, where teams of knights will fight with real weapons until one side surrenders, yields sufficient prisoners, or can no longer continue. The prizes are substantial, enough to change a man's fortune through ransoms and captured equipment. But more than money, this tournament offers something that only the most extreme medieval entertainments could provide: the authentic possibility of serious injury, or occasionally death, in front of cheering crowds. The real profit, though, comes from capturing opponents and holding them for ransom, a practice that makes these tournaments as much about strategy and economics as pure combat skill. As you review your equipment one final time, sword, lance, mace, dagger, you think about the evolution of tournament culture. In your grandfather's time, tournaments were barely distinguishable from actual battles. Knights died regularly, horses were killed, and spectators sometimes fled when the combat spilled beyond the designated area. But even as tournaments became more regulated and safer, there remained a demand for authentic danger. Crowds didn't want to see carefully choreographed displays of skill. They wanted genuine combat with genuine stakes. Today's Emma with tilde L with tilde copyright E represents entertainment pushed to its absolute limit. Organized warfare presented as sport. The horn sounds, calling knights to assembly. You join the procession toward the field, your destriers' hooves echoing on the hard ground. The crowd that has gathered is enormous. Thousands of spectators from across the social spectrum, all drawn by the promise of witnessing real violence performed by the military elite. In the center of the field, the herald reads the rules, carefully detailed, despite the violent nature of the sport. No deliberately striking horses, no attacking a knight who has surrendered. Prisoners must be treated according to the laws of chivalry. Ransoms will be negotiated after the Emma with tilde L with tilde copyright E ends. No weapons other than those approved by the marshals. But these constraints, designed to make capture, rather than killing, the primary goal, only emphasize how genuinely dangerous today's entertainment remains. You take your position with your team, 12 knights from England and Normandy, facing a similar number from France and the German states. The political implications aren't lost on anyone. This tournament serves multiple functions: entertainment, military training, diplomatic theater, and a way for knights to gain wealth through the time-honored practice of capturing opponents for ransom. The signal comes, a banner dropped from the judge's platform, and suddenly the field explodes into motion. 24 heavily armed men on war horses charge toward each other at full speed, their weapons raised, their war cries echoing across the field. The collision is devastating. Lances shatter, men are thrown from their saddles, horses scream as they fall or collide. Within seconds, the ordered charge has devolved into a series of individual combats scattered across the field. This is what medieval audiences craved. The authentic chaos of battle. The genuine terror and exhilaration of mortal combat. Your own opponent, a German knight whose heraldry you don't recognize, engages you with a skill that immediately commands respect. His sword work is elegant and lethal, his horsemanship superb, but you quickly realize that this isn't a contest of skill alone. It's a test of endurance, brutality, and willingness to do whatever is necessary to capture your opponent and claim the ransom that will make this day profitable. As the combat continues, you become aware of the crowd's reactions. They're not cheering for good technique or sportsmanlike conduct. They're roaring approval for the most violent exchanges, the most dramatic falls, the closest approaches to serious injury. The spectators have become complicit in what is essentially gladiatorial combat, disguised as knightly sport. Around you, the field is littered with broken weapons, wounded horses, and men who will need weeks or months to recover from today's entertainment. This is spectacle that demands genuine sacrifice, authentic suffering, and occasionally real death as the price of admission to the highest levels of medieval entertainment. Your German opponent manages to unhorse you with a perfectly timed thrust that catches your shield at just the right angle. As you hit the ground, the breath knocked from your lungs, you realize that the tournament has become a perfect metaphor for medieval entertainment culture. Elaborate, expensive, socially significant, and ultimately based on the audience's appetite for witnessing genuine human suffering. But even as you struggle to regain your footing, even as you prepare to continue the combat on foot with weapons that could easily cause permanent injury, you're aware that this represents only one extreme of medieval entertainment. There are other spectacles, other forms of public performance that push different boundaries, explore different taboos, offer different forms of vicarious experience to bored medieval audiences. The tournament continues around you, and you know that some of today's participants will not walk away uninjured. Yet the crowd continues to cheer, to bet, to treat genuine combat as the ultimate form of entertainment. This is what happens when a culture's appetite for extreme spectacle meets unlimited resources and minimal regulation. Entertainment becomes indistinguishable from warfare. Sport becomes synonymous with potential serious injury, and boredom drives people to create spectacles that challenge the very boundaries of what it means to be civilized. You are now witnessed to the strangest and most disturbing form of medieval entertainment. Justice as public spectacle, where legal disputes are resolved through methods that seem designed more to thrill audiences than to determine truth. It's a cold February morning in 1210, just outside the city of Winchester, and hundreds of people have gathered to witness both an ordeal and a trial by combat. The morning will begin with the ordeal of hot iron. A woman accused of adultery will grasp a red-hot metal bar and walk a specified distance. If her burns heal cleanly, within 3 days, she'll be declared innocent. If they become infected, she'll be condemned as guilty. But the main attraction will come afterward, a trial by combat, where 2 men will fight to resolve a dispute that conventional courts cannot settle. The case is simple enough. Robert the merchant claims that William the miller cheated him in a grain transaction. William denies the charge. There are no witnesses, no documentary evidence, no clear way to determine the truth through normal judicial means. So the court has ordered trial by combat, single combat, until one yields or can no longer continue, based on the medieval belief that God will grant victory to the righteous party. This is entertainment that emerges directly from the limitations of medieval legal systems. When courts couldn't determine facts through evidence and testimony, they turned to spectacle, transforming legal disputes into public dramas where divine judgment would supposedly reveal truth through martial prowess. The combatants have had weeks to prepare, including the right to hire professional champions if they lack fighting skills themselves. But both Robert and William have chosen to represent themselves, perhaps from pride, perhaps from lack of funds, perhaps from genuine belief in the righteousness of their causes. As you watch the elaborate preparations, the blessed weapons, the sworn oaths, the ritual purifications, you realize that trial by combat represents a perfect fusion of medieval entertainment appetites. Authentic violence, moral instruction, religious spectacle, and genuine uncertainty about the outcome. The marshals swear to stop the fight if a man yields. God shows right, not always by death, but by the first to falter. The crowd that has gathered represents the entire social spectrum. Nobles in their furs, merchants in their best woolens, peasants in their rough cloth, all united by fascination with this most extreme form of legal theater. Vendors move through the crowd, selling food and ale, treating the occasion as a fair or festival. But this isn't the only form of judicial entertainment available to medieval audiences. In the churchyard nearby, another crowd has gathered for a different kind of legal spectacle. Trial by ordeal. A woman accused of adultery will undergo the ordeal of hot iron, grasping a red-hot metal bar and walking a specified distance. If her burns heal cleanly, within 3 days, she'll be declared innocent. If they become infected, she'll be condemned as guilty. These ordeals represented the ultimate intersection of entertainment, religion, and law. They provided spectacular public dramas while claiming to reveal divine judgment about human behavior. The audience became witnesses not just to individual suffering, but to God's direct intervention in human affairs. As the combat begins, two middle-aged men, swinging swords, with more determination than skill, you're struck by the authentic terror in their faces. This isn't performed violence or staged drama. These are real people fighting for their lives, their reputations, their families' futures, all for the entertainment and edification of a crowd that has made their legal dispute into a public holiday. The combat is neither quick nor elegant. Both men are injured within minutes, their movements becoming increasingly desperate as blood loss and exhaustion take their toll. The crowd's reactions shift between cheering and horrified silence as the reality of what they're witnessing becomes undeniable. When Robert finally falls, too wounded to continue, he gasps out his surrender. The marshals immediately step in to stop the combat. God has spoken. Justice has been served. The crowd's response is complex. There's satisfaction at the resolution of the legal dispute. But there's also a strange emotional exhaustion. The aftermath that follows any extreme entertainment experience. William, declared the winner, and thus innocent of cheating, stands over his fallen opponent with an expression that mixes relief, horror, and something that might be guilt. He's won his case, but at a cost that will mark both men for the rest of their lives. As the crowd begins to disperse, you overhear conversations that reveal how medieval people processed these extreme entertainments. They speak of God's justice, of the importance of resolving disputes, of the necessity of public examples. But underneath these rationalizations, you hear the excitement of people who have witnessed the ultimate drama, life and death stakes, played out in real time with genuine consequences. This is where medieval entertainment culture reached one of its logical extremes. The transformation of fundamental human institutions, law, religion, community, into public spectacles designed to satisfy audiences hungry for ever more intense experiences. Yet even as you witnessed these judicial ordeals, changes were coming. Within a few years, the church would forbid clerical participation in ordeals, and new forms of evidence-based justice would begin to replace these ancient rituals of divine judgment. Trial by combat would persist much longer, though rarely used, as courts developed better methods of determining truth through testimony and documentation. The appetite for legal spectacle would find new outlets. Elaborate execution ceremonies, public punishments, formal judicial proceedings that maintained the theater while improving the justice. Medieval people, you realize, had discovered something both fascinating and terrifying about human nature. That boredom, combined with social sanction and religious justification, could drive communities to create entertainments of almost unlimited extremity. The appetite for spectacle, once awakened, seemed to have no natural boundaries, except those imposed by external authority or sheer physical impossibility. As our long night's journey through medieval entertainment draws to a close, you find yourself back in your own time, in your own comfortable bed, perhaps wondering whether the people you've encountered tonight were the same species as modern humans. The activities we've witnessed together, from simple dice games to trials by combat, reveal something profound about the relationship between boredom, social structure, and human appetite for spectacle. Medieval people weren't inherently more violent or less civilized than we are. They were responding to the same basic human needs we all experience: the need for stimulation, for community, for meaning, for escape from the routine pressures of daily life. But their solutions to these needs were shaped by a world vastly different from ours. A world without mass media, without professional entertainment industries, without the safety regulations and moral constraints that limit modern spectacle. When medieval people became bored, they had to create their own entertainment, and that entertainment revealed both the creativity and the darkness of human nature. The progression we followed tonight, from simple games to genuine combat sports to judicial murder as public theater, shows how entertainment appetites can escalate when unchecked by external constraints. Each shocking spectacle became routine, creating demand for something even more extreme, more transgressive, more dangerous. Yet medieval entertainment culture also reveals positive aspects of human nature that we sometimes lose in our modern isolation. The communal aspect of medieval recreation. Entire villages participating in festivals. Whole communities gathering for storytelling. Collective celebration of seasonal cycles. Provided social bonds and shared meaning that our individualized entertainment often lacks. The characters you've met tonight: Thomas the miller with his dice, Agnes the baker's wife with her May Day celebrations, Sir Geoffrey with his tournament combat, were all responding to the same fundamental human need, the desire for experiences that transcend the ordinary, that provide meaning and excitement beyond the daily routine of survival. Modern people satisfy these needs through movies, sports, video games, social media, entertainments that are largely safe, regulated, and consumed individually. Medieval people created elaborate community spectacles that were dangerous, unregulated, and intensely social. Neither approach is inherently superior, but both reveal something essential about human nature. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of medieval entertainment culture wasn't its violence or extremity, but its collective nature. When entire communities participated in or witnessed extreme spectacles, individual moral responsibility became diffused. The community shaming procession, the public execution, the trial by combat. These weren't the products of individual sadism, but of collective decision-making, community consensus that such entertainments were not just acceptable, but necessary. This collective aspect makes medieval entertainment both fascinating and frightening. It shows how ordinary people, faced with boredom and limited options for stimulation, can create elaborate justifications for spectacles that individual consciences might reject. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you're wondering what future historians will make of our own entertainment culture. What will they think of professional fighting leagues where athletes suffer permanent brain damage for audience excitement? Of reality television that exploits personal trauma for viewer engagement? Of social media platforms that monetize outrage and division? Medieval people thought their entertainments were justified by religious necessity, community bonding, legal tradition, and social order. We justify our extreme entertainments through different rhetoric, artistic expression, athletic achievement, free market choice, technological progress. But the underlying dynamic remains the same: human appetite for spectacle, pushing against whatever boundaries society establishes. The strange things people did when bored in medieval times weren't aberrations or signs of primitive brutality. They were expressions of fundamental human needs and appetites that every culture must address. Medieval solutions were shaped by their technology, their social structures, their religious beliefs, and their moral frameworks. Our solutions are shaped by our own context, but the underlying needs remain constant. We all seek escape from boredom, connection with others, experiences that transcend the ordinary, spectacles that provide meaning and excitement. The forms change, but the appetite endures. As sleep finally claims you, perhaps you'll dream of medieval fairs and tournaments, of dancing manias and trials by combat. Or perhaps you'll dream of our own strange entertainments, the screens and games and spectacles we've created to fill our own empty hours. Either way, you'll be dreaming of the eternal human struggle against boredom, and the sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrible things we create when we refuse to simply sit quietly in our rooms and accept the silence. The medieval world is gone, but the human nature that created its strange entertainments remains. In every age, in every culture, when people become bored enough, they find ways to create spectacle, to push boundaries, to transform the ordinary world into something extraordinary. Whether that transformation brings beauty or horror, community or division, meaning or chaos. Sleep well and dream of the strange things that boredom can inspire the human spirit to create